Okay, we're done on that one. Thanks very much. I'm going to go back to item 11 and I'll welcome the group back here to Future Fund. And would Councillor Fletcher, you like to move this? Yes. I'll second it on that basis. And where the fuck is page 11? Right, we're considering the Future Fund's performance and our feedback on their draft statement of intent. This is quite a good result in the global turmoil recently. The share price has dropped by 4.5% since we sold them as well. Councillor Fletcher is going to move this. Once you've presented, I'll ask Councillor Fletcher to sum up things as well. Okay, off you go, please.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. I'll just give a short introduction, and next to me are my colleagues Andrew John and Megan Holly from the Group Treasury team, who are also here in support of this item. So as the Mayor's outlined, this report covers two aspects: the proposed shareholder comments on the Future Fund Statement of Intent for 2025 to 28, and the first quarterly report from the Future Fund covering the period 1 December through to 31 March. So for the proposed shareholder comments component of this is sort of the next step in the statement of intent process. You'll recall the governing body issued the letter of expectation to the Future Fund back in February, and then by 1 April we received the draft statement of intent, and then those high-level themes and points of feedback on the draft SOIs were workshopped in a joint workshop of the Transport and Infrastructure and Resilience Committee and the CCO Direction and Oversight Committee, and those comments as it relates to AFDL are reflected in this report for your formal approval. And so those comments came from feedback from council staff and from Hokura, the Independent Māori Statutory Board Secretariat. So the other shareholder comments have been, for the other substantive CCOs, have been approved earlier this month at their respective committee meetings. And then pending your agreement to the shareholder comments as set out in this report, the Mayor will provide those in writing to the Future Fund. And then once they've received them, a CCO board must consider the shareholder comments and then provide council with a final statement of intent by 31 July. So I'll just pass very briefly to Andrew just to give a few points as it relates to the quarterly performance.
Thanks, Sarah. Just on the quarterly performance, as this is the first quarterly report, it relates to 4 months since they sold the shares, because they sold the shares in December. But going forward, it will continue to be a 3-month report. Just some key highlights to note was the sale of the shares in this quarter. It was higher than budget. The establishment of the liquidity facility between the fund and the Auckland Council. Progression on the local bill. Just a few points to note on the quarterly results. The balance of the fund at the end of the quarter was $31 million above the budget. This was due to the selling price being higher than the budget. The return for the quarter, however, was at 4.37%. As you may recall, the budget, the forecast from the fund is expected to be 7.24%. However, note that because of the higher sale price, the forecast dividend from the fund is expected to be about $4 million higher than budget at $38 million. The fund is expected to pay this at the end of the financial year on 30 June. We are forecasting at 30 June, the fund value will be about $10 million higher than budget. The return from the fund over that period will be around 4.15. The fund at the moment is going through a process of appointing the global investment managers. Given it's such an important task, they're taking their time over this, and they're hoping to have this process finished by the end of by June. In the meantime, the funds are held in term deposits across multiple banks. This has ensured that the funds return some capital at the same time. It has preserved the capital value as well. Just finally note that Yeah, as the man alerted to, right now the share price is at 768. So it's about 5% lower than when we sold. That's about $64 million better off we are at the moment. And if we had invested the funds in just a global index when we sold it, we would be around 1% better off compared to the 4.37 we were at the quarter. With that perspective there.
That's all from us, and just happy to defer to Councillor Fletcher, and then happy to take any questions.
So do you want to speak now, or do you want to wait till the end?
Oh,
Councillor?
I'm happy to say something now, answer any questions as well. I want to acknowledge the staff. The situation for council is favourable, but because of the timing of this, in this quarter, it probably looks unfavourable because of the fact, because of the return and the expectation of return. But as Andrew has explained, we're actually in a much better position because of the term deposits, with the global investment manager yet to be appointed, and that investment, which is going to enable the 7.4 return of expectation. But the bottom line is council's in a more favourable position. It's just a complex accounting situation. So I want to again acknowledge the hard work during the startup phase of the directors that we have. They are meeting regularly. It's been fantastic having Meg and Holly working directly with them, and the oversight that is provided there. I'm well pleased with the progress that is being made, but I wouldn't want people to misunderstand this, what appears on paper to be an irregularity, which in actual fact isn't.
I agree with you. So questions to either Councillor Fletcher or Sarah, Megan and Andrew. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and kia ora koutou. I got a question, and it's about the 38 million expected to be paid to council. Now, I'm trying to understand that the airport shares, am I reading correctly that as a result of the airport shares, and you've had the long-term plan forecast, when the airport shares were sold, they were sold, I think, if I look at number 22, it was $8, or where is it? It was $8.08 per share, which increased it. So if it was still the LTP projections, how much would Auckland Council have been paid on the 30th of June? So I think, just to clarify in my head, what's the difference between the projected and the actual sale that ended up going into the future fund as a result of the airport shares?
So the amount that went into the future fund was $31 million more than was projected. So we were assuming in the LTP, the share price, that we would sell it at $7.89. We sold it at $8.08. So that was 39 million. That resulted in $31 million more going into the fund.
Oh, okay. So we would have got, if I take that, we would have only got 7 million. If it hadn't been sold for the higher price, we would have only, council would have only got 37 million back.
No, so we got $31 million more.
I understand
from the sale.
I understand,
Yeah.
but that more cost was as a result of the airport shares being sold for $8.08.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
But if we ended up just selling them for the long-term plan projected price, because currently they're $7.68 at the moment, if they were sold at the long-term price, what I'm saying is that if it wasn't for the $8.08, we wouldn't have this extra 31 million. And with the long-term plan projected value, which would have then had us only getting 7.
From a dividend point of view, the 38 is the dividend we will receive from the fund. If we had sold the shares at the LTP price, we would have got 34 million as opposed to 38 million. Because we sold it at a higher price, we are getting $4 million more in extra dividend, because the dividend is based on the value of the share of the value of the fund on day one. So that's, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know too.
it was,
Councillor,
yeah, it was also, not
is
just.
that all your
So,
questions?
sorry, and I've got one more question.
I was just going to add that as well as the share price being higher, or the sale price being higher, the transaction costs were also lower. So between the two of them, we ended up with a net price much higher as well.
So my supplementary question is based just on what you've said around the transaction cost. To set this all up, because I know there was a price that was mentioned earlier, and that was about $500,000, I think. Did we get close to that $500,000 for setting up the Auckland Future Fund?
Yes, so that's separate than the airport share sale. They're separate for the actual setting up the Auckland Future Fund. So it was $300,000 that was set aside in the LTP for the setup costs, and we hit about $298,000. So we're bang on.
So to the CEO, I know there was a projected 500,000. Can you just let me know how much it cost? I'm assuming from what I've been told is about 300,000 to set up, and not the 500,000 projected. Am I correct in that, or it was about 500,000?
I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I think broadly you're right. It was less to set up than what we'd originally indicated by way of budget.
Okay then.
No, I think I understand the way in which Councillor Filipaina may be heading with this, but again, I think it just shows the quality of the directors that we have that were able to ensure that transactional costs were kept to an absolute minimum, and it's something that perhaps can provide a roadmap for other entities into the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor, for that answer as well. Councillor Ferry, you have a question.
Sorry, I just have a slight situation with a child at home, so I'll try to ask it
I'll
very
come back to you if
quickly.
you like. Do you want me to come?
Yeah, if you've got other questions, that would be great. Thank you.
No problem. Come back to you.
Thanks.
Councillor Darby.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Sarah and team. So this is a report. It's got two parts to it: SOI feedback and also the Q3. I appreciate that this is like it's the first report, but going forward, Sarah, would one of the trustees, the chair, would it be usual for the chair to come before us on the reports?
So the way it operates in the CCO direction and oversight context, which is probably the one you're most familiar with in terms of the other substantive CCOs, is we don't have the chairs come in each quarter. They come in for what we call a deep dive session, sort of. It ends up being 2 or 3 times a year and so we sort of take the quarterly reports largely as we present those and take back any queries, and then it gives an opportunity rather than sort of troping through everyone to have one deep dive session, and I suppose that's certainly open to this. We're obviously in the current term, and at the moment this material comes to the governing body, but I mean that's certainly something for the governing body or a future committee to consider about how they might like to structure that engagement with the future fund, appreciating that by the nature of its business, there's not things that don't sort of change as frequently or as many updates to provide as maybe you might have in the context of some of our other CCOs.
Okay, look, that's understood. Thank you for that. Just in terms of the decision on the global investment manager or managers, it could be plural, that hasn't been taken yet. And how long have the trustees been in market looking for somebody, and what knowledge do we have about when a decision is likely to be made on a global investment manager or managers?
The directors first started looking for potential investment managers in probably January, just kind of having a scope out of who might be helpful to invite into the RFP. Oh, sorry. So in January, they started looking at potential candidates that they would like to invite into the RFP. That went out in, I think, February or March, and they've come up with a short list that they are doing kind of a further discussions or kind of identifying who's going to be the best person.
So it's advanced in the next couple of weeks, but yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And on the SOI, I notice that under purpose, the purpose is to maintain or increase the real value of assets put into the fund. Why? And that's also stated also, I think, no, I'm just going to, then it goes on in the part 2 to provide a strong return to council. Why do we use the word to maintain? Why is the word maintain there when our expectation was to grow it, to increase it? That was the absolute assumption when the councillors and I supported selling the airport investment, was to grow it, not to maintain it. I understand to keep and not go backwards, but the focus there and the purpose was to grow it. Now, can you just explain why we're using a word like maintain? It feels like a backstop. And I don't believe, and I have to add comment here, I don't believe it was the intent of the councillors who voted for it to maintain. It was an absolute go grow it.
The purpose in the statement of intent is taken from the Auckland Future Fund distribution policy that was set in the LTP of that's the purpose of the fund. So that hasn't been something that the board or ourselves have changed. That's just been what's in the policy. I think it comes from the concept that 2% is always going to be retained in the fund for inflation. So it's kind of two parts. So there's always the distribution and money being retained into the fund. So I think that's what it's trying to communicate. It'll be reviewed, I guess, in the next LTP. So we feel like it's not working how it should be. That's something we could review then.
So that's not something we're being asked. This paper actually is asking for feedback on the SOI, right? So is this not something that we can provide as feedback now? I mean, mine's just one view. I think it should be more honed and focused on growing the asset and not maintaining it.
Yep.
So is this not the opportunity? Is it a policy decision as opposed to an SOI decision?
So the word in the SOI reflects the policy that's in the LTP. It also reflects what is built into the trust deed. So that is what you see in the purpose there reflects the trust deed and the LTP policy. So it's not something that can be sort of changed in isolation of those other policy documents.
Okay, I take that point, but I do want to express concern about that going forward. There's also mention about the Auckland Council Responsible Investment Policy, and it states there that the Trust will work with staff on reviewing the policy. Now, I'm actually quite concerned about that statement as well. I'm not sure where that comes from, because this council has just reviewed the policy in June 24, and it looks like the trustees don't quite like the policy, and they're going to work with us to review it. It's for this council to state whether it's going to review it. So what are they saying there? What are they saying about the responsible investment policy?
So when this council reviewed and agreed that responsible investment policy, there were a number of concerns raised, and you kind of wanted to look at it further. And the advice was that, you can review that at any point in time. And I think there was direction at the time to get the trustees and advisors to provide advice around what are the options, how do these policies work and other, for other funds, and then bring that advice back to you. So it was really a request from the council to get advice from the trustees. It's not something that the trustees have initiated from their end.
Okay, I'm probably being over cautious on that one. Thank you. That's good. I'll make a comment too when ready, Chair.
Thank you, councillor. Next question I have is councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the team on this. Just wanting to check something. So to Councillor Darby's comment, I feel like the resolution was something like maintain or increase over the term. So I'm assuming that 2% we're taking out is about maintaining the real value, and then, of course, we'd like to increase it, but because the point was to get council revenue, the revenue doesn't dramatically increase it as much as maybe a growth fund would rather than a dividend fund. Is that what?
That's correct. The wording is to maintain and protect the capital. And
Yeah.
You're right, the assumption was that if the return of the fund is expected to be 7.24%, and if the requirement for distribution is 5.24, you're left with 2%, which is roughly the average inflation. So the idea that's rather wise to protect and to maintain.
Cool, thank you. And so did you say that if we sold it today versus when we did in December, we would have been $60 million worse off? Would you say 16 or 60?
It's 67.74 million as of right now.
Okay. And the additional, so we got the additional 30 because we thought we would sell at a lower price, but we sold at a higher price. But also, how much did we end up? We budgeted about 10 or 12 million for what we thought would take to sell, like the share broker fees, I guess, but we didn't have to spend any money on. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, Councillor. The fees were, or the 808 was net of everything. So that's what we received. And yeah, we didn't pay any fees on that. That's correct.
Okay, so those fees just went into the fund instead of being paid to someone, share brokers.
Yeah, there were no broker fees, but there were some advisory and legal fees. That was $350,000.
Right, but the 12 million never got spent that we budgeted.
Yeah, it's about 13. So, yeah, much.
Okay, and the 38, because we went 6 months early, I work out just on the back of the envelope, is that about double what we would have got if we just continued with the airport dividends?
If the airport dividend, dividend they announced in March would have given us 10.2 million. So here we're getting 38 million.
Okay, so we received 4 times what we would have if we'd still had the airport shares.
Nearly, yeah.
In that 6 month period.
That's correct. From
Okay.
December onwards, yeah.
Okay, and that's just okay. So at the moment they're still on the term deposits to get that obviously increased value, dividend. But our assumption is when it moves to equities, we'll be able to get that money to put back in as well, the 2%.
Yeah, the idea is that once the managers are appointed, they will the funds, which is 1.3 billion, will be distributed to the fund managers to invest. And yeah, the expectation is that they will deliver on the 7.24% return, because that's they'll be signing up to that when they're appointed.
Okay, but we'll stay in the term deposits until we have that. So it's still protected until then.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Ferry, are you all good to go now?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for your patience there. So my question is kind of an admin-y question, so it might be more for the Chief Executive. So I would have expected that now that we've got through sort of the establishment and all of that kind of stuff, that this is now coming to CCO committee. So is that the intention from now on? that it come to CCO oversight alongside the other CCOs. Obviously, transport goes to a specific committee for itself, but yeah, is that going to be the practice from here?
Funnily enough, the Deputy Mayor just asked me that question. I'll get Sarah to comment, but the fact that it's a governing body was a direct consequence of commitments made at the time of the decisions, and my view is that it needs to transition to other appropriate committees. It is a CCO, but Sarah?
Yeah, I'd just echo that, Phil. So I think it was considered that given this is the first full year statement of intent for the Future Fund, and the need for all councillors to be across this, not just in a subcommittee, that it would come to this forum, noting obviously the importance of the statement of intent relative to the local bill, which our lead engagement on that is through Councillor Fletcher as well. So,
And I'm not a member of the CCO committee, but I attend whenever I can.
Yeah, so I mean, there is, I think we'd all agree, there's broad interest, and that was the logic behind it being a governing body. I just note that as we approach October, there will be a review, if you like, of the committee structure as we start the new term. So we're in for a reset anyway, perhaps, question mark.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it probably is time for it to transition, noting I'm not on that committee either, but I also attend whenever I can, and it is open to all councillors to attend. I agree that having some GB oversight up until this point has, I think, been helpful, but yeah, we'll see where that goes next. Thank you.
I hate doing this, but I would say regardless of who the mayor is and who's back, this is something you're committing to, is that right, Mr. Chief Executive, to get the terms of reference for any new committees sort of prepared in advance?
Well, we will prepare some advice. It is the Mayor's prerogative as to the committee structure, as most of you will know, but we'll prepare some advice. I'm getting out of turn here, but I do believe there are some opportunities to streamline the committee structure and the way your meeting schedule operates, but I'll leave it there for another day.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Darby, you've got some more questions.
Yeah, sorry,
I think
Chair.
quite the opposite, Councillor Williamson, but that's another story.
I had this one written down, but I overlooked it. I'm just looking at the gross return, net return, real growth of the fund, and those measures. They all note that they're at risk for the year-to-date projected. Is that related to the lateness in investing the proceeds of the airport sale, largely?
It's more to do with the volatility in markets and the expectation on returns. So the expectation that the fund would be able to generate the 7.4%, and the timing of the investment also comes into play. But in reality, just the volatility in markets would have put that at risk anyway.
Sorry, you're putting weight on the volatility of the markets.
Yes, it's just what has happened in the last few months, I guess, has created some volatility in markets anyway. So there are two things: the timing. If they had invested the money, who knows, what they would have invested it in and what the returns would have been. But one thing we know is that over the last few months, there's been quite a bit of volatility in markets. From at the start of this year, so that also would have put the return requirements or return expectations at risk.
But is it not more of a case that the trustees aren't even in a position to invest in equities globally? They're not even in a position to do that because they don't have a manager.
That's correct.
That's the main thing. Is that not the main thing that's contributing to that risk?
Yeah, to some extent, that's correct.
Not the volatility of the markets, because you can't access the markets because you don't have a manager.
That's correct. They don't have managers right now, but the markets also would have, even if they had it, sorry, what I'm trying to say is that even if they had it, that would have been at risk. yeah, the returns would have been at risk.
Yeah, I don't quite get that. I mean, the NASDAQ has gone up in the last month. The NASDAQ has gone up 10%. The Dow Jones has gone up 6%. The FTSE has gone up 6%. And volatility is something that investment managers thrive on. That's where they win.
Council, if I just can add one thing else. So if we looked at if they would invest in a diversified portfolio like the MSCI index, and you look at that, that's about 1%. So the increase is marginal, is what we are, it would have been. It's hard to know because they haven't invested the funds, but given what we've seen in markets, it would be marginal.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, you're next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, just trying to follow, not being a big investor myself, just trying to follow all the various comparisons to the airport shares in this new future fund, especially in the light of the commentary at the time by number of market brokers that their airport shares were in quote unquote a rare high quality infrastructure business. But I do want to just zero in on some specifics here, because when that first 7% parcel of shares went, there was a comparison in the years from 2011 to 2019 that showed that airport shareholder returns had gone from roughly about 70 million in 2011 to 2.471 billion in 2019. So that was an increase of 2.4 billion in shareholder returns for Auckland Council, made up of capital growth and dividends. So my question at the end of all that is, does this future fund then, is it going to have that same sort of phenomenal capital growth if we're not just talking about dividends? Because the big increase in the airport shares at that time was in that capital growth as well as the dividend. So how does capital growth apply to the portfolio in the future fund?
Councillor, I cannot predict what what markets would do. So I guess I'm not in a position to say what, in the future what the balance might look like. But one thing, the fund is forecast to generate a return of 7.24%, and the global investment managers that that the fund is looking to appoint will be signing up to that mandate. So that's the expectation of the fund. And yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a...
That's okay, I appreciate the explanation, but I guess the point I'm just trying to make is that given whatever the nature of a fund might be, and certainly in the case of the airport shares, there are some that have a much stronger capital growth, don't they, as opposed to just a dividend return?
That's correct. The one thing I'd add is that as a shareholder, our intention was not to sell the shares, so therefore we were dependent on the dividend return from the airport. So that's what we realized on a year-to-year, on an ongoing year-by-year basis to some extent. And the fund is expected to deliver a 5% return, which is a much higher yield than the airport currently does.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any more questions? I think that it. Councillor Filipaina.
Sorry,
Councillor.
Deputy Mayor. Look, I don't know much about finance, but my question is, with the dividend that was going to be paid out, this will be my last question around airport shares, but with the dividend that got paid out on the 4th of April this year of 6.25 cents, and with all the shares that we had, what would our dividend have been? I don't know how to calculate it.
It would have been 10,201,965.38. It would have been $10,201,965.38 to be exact.
So our dividend, we would have received
10 million.
10 million.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. well, we ended up getting the 31 extra because of the $8.08 when we sold them all. But I mean, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have got the 38 that we are going to get in June. That's really the crux of it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Just to go back to those questions, and I may have, excuse me if I've missed anything. The council's prediction of the commercial value of the shareholding was lowballed somewhat. So the value exceeded that calculation by 31 million. Is that right?
I believe the price in the LTP was the price at that time when the LTP was set. So it was the market price at the time. I think that's what was used. And Michael might be able to give a better idea, but my understanding is the price at the time was when the LTP was set.
Sure. So that's interesting. So in terms of what it's actually earning now, just about a year on, I guess, since, well, first part of a year since the final tranche was sold, how much is that again? We're earning from what we have now, the proceeds from that last sale. What are we earning from the future fund?
So the proceeds from the sale was 1.318 billion, and the up to 31 March, those returned 4.37%.
No, but that's fine. I'm just looking for the money. How much money are we earning from the cashed up airport shares?
17.7 million as of
Okay.
31 March 25.
Okay, you see, had we kept the shares, even at a very conservative dividend, I think we would have got 33 million over those 2 years, but I suspect that's a little bit low. In terms, just saying, in terms of the global investment manager, is that a full-time appointment, or how's that work?
So there'll be investment managers who manage other portfolios as well. So we are looking at the likes.
Sort of like a consultant contractor.
Yeah, so there'll be, like Goldman Sachs are one of the huge global investment managers that manage billions of dollars across the world.
So the directors as appointed for their expertise in these matters, they're not making those calls, they just tuck the money into the bank. Is that right? Is that the way it works?
Councillor, until they appoint the managers, they have the money is in diversified bank accounts. Once they appoint the managers, the funds will be transferred to the investment manager to manage. Given the significance of, or the importance of those managers and what they're expected to do, it's taken time, but that's because they're trying to find the right managers, what they feel are the right managers to manage this significant amount of money for council.
So we're paying for the directors, I mentioned some staff, and we're paying for a global investment manager. What is the annual overheads for that likely to be then, this organisation? We've heard talk of half a million a year, is that?
As per the policy, Councillor, the fund is expected to return 7.64%, and there's 40 basis points for fees, and so the net return is expected to be 7.24% from the funds, and that is in the Auckland Council Future Fund policy and reflected in the establishment documents.
Previously, when our money was invested, and I'm using the term for the first time, I think, correctly in today's agenda, invested in the airport, we didn't actually have to worry about overhead so much. Is that be right?
We were passive owner of the airport shares, councillor, so you're right, there was no fees paid.
Is it conceivable that this global investment manager, and obviously the title suggests that this person will be looking all around the world for good and sound investments, and also at the same time ethical investments, no cluster bombs or anything like that, weapons, military industrial complex, who knows. But would it be conceivable that the global investment manager, looking closer to home and looking for a safe investment, blue chip, may actually invest in Auckland International Airport Limited? Would that be possible? Would this person, and maybe a she, would they be allowed to do that?
They can, under their mandate and under the SIPO that will be agreed between the directors and the manager, they could invest in such assets, yes.
Thank you.
Could I just clarify too that the investment manager will be, we're appointing a company rather than, it's not an individual person, we're not hiring someone, it's a company that we're appointing.
Right, are there any more questions? I'll ask you then to step back. Thank you very much for your content.
Oh, Madam Chair, I just had a question of clarification I did write in the chat.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, I can't see the chat from where I am, so you go.
Oh, it was just the question, and I just wanted it on the record. The 31 million is not made up. It doesn't make up the 38 million. The 31 million increased the value of what's in the fund, but that only benefited us by a couple million of returns. But the 38 million is the percentage return from the overall 1.31 billion, isn't it?
That's correct. Otherwise, we would have received 34 million of dividend. Because the opening number was bigger, we are going to get 38 million now.
So the 31 million additional that we got just helped get us slightly more, 4 million more in dividends, which is great. But we are $28 million better off than if the airport dividend of the same 6 months.
Correct.
That's correct.
It's almost, we received almost 4 times the income than we would have if we just had the shares.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with that 31 million. Can I just check?
Yeah, we're talking about a long-term future fund, and airport investments are long-term future, which is why people paid so handsomely, and we got the.
I didn't ask you, Councillor Lee. So could I just have that repeated again? That the point of this.
Councillor Lee, shush. Is it one question at a time? If you want to ask another question, that's fine. But Councillor Hills, do you want to?
No, I'm just wanting it on the record that the 31 million is related to additional money that's gone into the fund, not come out of the fund. And the 38 million is a percentage of the overall return.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's almost 4 times what we would have earned if it was airport shares.
Correct.
Thanks.
Right, thank you, staff. Councillor Lee, do you have another question?
I've got a question, in that I think for those who haven't been following this as closely as myself, there is a misunderstanding about the sequencing of what is taking place and the timing of the global investment manager we've had a bit of a chat about, but the timing around the shares being on term deposit and what then might likely be going to happen. So I just think it would be helpful for the record that one of you, run through the sequence of what has occurred to date, and the expectation that by the end of June, the Global Investment Manager will be in place, and what might likely take place going forward, at which time things will probably revert back to a CCO committee. But could you just, Megan, run through, or Andrew, what has occurred? And also, you might reflect on how much careful timing went into the sale of those shares, because the shares had been nothing like that value, leading right up until the weekend that they were sold.
Yes, I think the initial plan was that the investment manager was going to be appointed, and then the shares were going to be sold. That by having the shares, selling the shares before the investment manager was appointed, the market wasn't expecting the directors to sell the shares. It caught the market off guard, and arguably that was what increased the share price over those last few months. So it was a strategic decision for them to say, we want to catch the market off guard, sold it for a high price, and now they're taking the time. They've had meetings overseas on their own pocket, their own dime, with overseas investment managers, getting a really big base. I think there were 21 people or companies that responded to the RFP. They've had rounds of meetings going through it, analysing them, coming up with a short list, meeting with them. They've had another 2 rounds of different communications and meetings and tasks to make sure that they're making the right appointment. It's a long-term appointment. It's not going to be reviewed in a year or 2 years. This is something that, we're looking like with the future fund, it's long-term, so they want to make this really sure, because it will make a huge impact on the success of the fund, making sure we've got the right people managing this for us.
I think that's very helpful, Madam Chair. So thank you for that explanation, which I hope can give some measure of comfort to those councillors who have perhaps felt uncomfortable.
Thank you, Sarah, Megan and Andrew. I invite you now to step back and I'll open for comments. And probably what I will say very succinctly is, at the end of the day, we are going to get 38 million in June, when if we didn't have this fund, we would have got 10 million. But I'll hand over now to Chris Darby, Councillor Darby, for comment as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just brief. Look, I support the establishment of this fund. I think it's a good move. I want to express some caution though. It was set up a long time ago now, and the airport holding was, I think it was early December it was disposed of, and the intention was to ultimately create a diversified investment fund. So here we are, coming up 7 months since disposal. We do not have a diversified fund. It is in cash, and it is low yield cash. And the expectation is that long-term projected return is 7.64. We're getting behind on that. Now, I know that's a long term, it's not an annual, it's not just this year, but it's really hard now to achieve 7.64%, probably within the next 2 years, because the Global Investment Manager has not been appointed and is not in the seat to start acquiring, disposing. It's not just about acquiring, it's about actively being in the market, capitalising on the market conditions. And as I pointed out earlier, the market has been very volatile. Global investment managers or investment managers locally, Australia, wherever, they absolutely love the environment of a volatile market. That's where the smart ones really shine through, and hopefully we have one or two that shine for us on this. But, there has been opportunity galore in the last 6 weeks to make and lose money in equities. And as I said earlier, the NASDAQ is up. I think it's just a fraction under 10% in the last month, and other markets are up as well. could be different tomorrow. But I am mindful of the statements in the paper there that actually show those, gross and net returns and real growth of the fund. Those measures are at risk on the year to date. I think that might extend if we don't start, diversifying out of cash as it's held at the moment. Now, many of us might think that cash is secure, but it's actually really low yield. That is not what is going to really grow the asset base of that fund. So I'm taking some responsibility here and being one of the councillors who did support the disposal of the shares and the establishment of the fund, but I did think we'd be in a better position at the moment. I thought we would have had at least some of that cash in a diversified portfolio. Maybe not all of it, because you're not going to go and spend it all on day one. You take your time, but it does worry me a little bit that we're getting behind, and that 7.64 is becoming a much harder target. So, watching brief.
Yep, fair call. Now, sadly, I have to move an extension of time. Councillor Fletcher will second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. No. That's why I said it quickly. All right, okay. Having moved successfully the extension of time, I will move to Councillor Filipaina for a comment. Sorry, Councillor.
No, that's all right, Chair. Look, I just want it recorded that I know that there was an extra $31 million that's recorded. I also know that as a result of that extra 31 million, there's 38 million coming through on the 30th of June. If it wasn't for that 31 million, that price, and I'm not subtracting 31 from 38 to have 7, because that's been explained, but I want it recorded. If it wasn't for that 31, our money that we were getting on the 30th of June would not be the 38 that we're currently getting. I also want to make sure, and it gets recorded, that this Auckland Future Fund is a long-term fund, very similar to the airport shares. We no longer have those, and as I've said previously, the committee meetings, it is what it is. But for me, if it's a long-term, I'll be interested in the next few years to see what the sale price is, and as I said earlier, was 766 currently, and in April of 2025 was 6.25 cents. So look, I just look forward to getting the money, because that's exactly what was promised around the fund. And Councillor Darby, I agree, and look forward to sort of just making sure there's some checks and balances in regards to the future fund. So I will be supporting it, but I just wanted it recorded in regards to that. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Oh, thank you. I've taken on board all of the points that have been made today, but can I just remind you that the legislation is working its way through. It's important for the integrity of this fund for the future that everything is done with due process. And I think ultimately the test is going to be, in a year or two's time, for us to look back and look at the quality of the returns and the investments that have been made. So we can debate it until the cows come home in terms of what we would do with the money if it were ours individually. But we have got 3 of the smartest, brightest directors working on our behalf who are acting in a particularly careful manner and are very mindful of the need to grow that fund and are confident that they will deliver. And again, I'd like to thank staff. It's not easy starting something up from scratch, and I think we've seen a good example of care with the funds, with decisions that have been taken. It's been that there haven't been any flagstaffs in this particular situation. It's been done very, very carefully, and I just commend it to you and hope that you can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. On that note, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, we've been all over the page today, and so we are now